he made them release him. He shouldn't have come to us. So depending. But if, yeah, they do key hole. Yeah, Marcus, we can't.
Of the people for whom we serve. Amen. So on behalf of the Glenelg Shire On behalf of the Glenelg Shire Council, I respectfully acknowledge traditional lands and waters of the Gunditj Jamara, Jawajali and Bowendik people and their respective cultural heritages. I acknowledge the elders past and present here at today's gathering and through them to all Aboriginal people. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people provide an important contribution to Australia's cultural heritage and identity. We respectfully acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait community living throughout the Glenelg Shire and the contribution they make to the Glenelg Shire's prosperity and well-being. To those present here in the gallery today, by attending the public meeting of the Council, you're consenting to your image, voice and comments being recorded and published. Council meetings may be live streamed, and they are, and the Chief Executive Officer will enable a copy of that recording to the public. Receipt of apologies, we have Councillor Wilson. Question time from the previous meeting. There are questions there at 6.1 on pages 3 and 4, 5 and 6 of the agenda. We move to item 6.2 in today's agenda, questions from the gallery. There are a couple of questions here, so in no particular order. Neville Mason, are you here? Thank you, Neville.
Mayor.
Just bear with us for a second, Neville. I'll get you the microphone there, just so that can be heard online.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
It does work, it's just, yeah.
Can Council please inform the community of the person responsible for making this decision to cancel funding for the Christmas lights? As per the Portland Observer newspaper front page article on the 13th of the 10th, without councillor knowledge or consultation with the community.
Thank you, Mr. Manson. Obviously, there's a couple of issues there I'd like to unpack, and I'm just going to unpack them in no particular order. We might just have some technical difficulties. All good? Thank you, guys. First off, community consultation. So, Mr. Manson, not everything goes out to community consultation. For example, our iconic events, for example, the Kelpie, Wood, Wine and Roses, the Upwelling, they actually receive significant funding from this council, yet they don't actually go out for community consultation. You can certainly say in hindsight, that's something that probably should have occurred, and we'll take that feedback on board. Now, you mentioned also the cancelling of the actual lights, as reported in the Observer. So I want to just sort of clarify. So cancelling the funding for or cancelling the lights is 100% incorrect. And let me explain. So if Council was to hand that money back to the community and say community organisations like Keppel, Prince or Menzel picked it up like they have over the last few years, then they would actually get the public recognition, not Council. So yes, Council was going to cancel them, and look for the community to take them up. And that was obviously the narrative in the press release as well. Unfortunately, when you have, and obviously you mentioned the Portland Observer there, when you have a headline saying tree light axed, that took any ability for council to recover and provide a clear narrative for the community. And also say in hindsight, leaving a little time to organise the projects was not ideal either. I want to say it was absolutely disgusting that I had one of those business owners ring me and say, and people were ringing their businesses, abusing them for being greedy due to the Observer's article. I cannot unreservedly apologise enough to those workers, to those business owners, that they had to endure that. I want to be clear straight off the bat there. As for the responsibility, well, that's easy. It's councillors. To say there was no knowledge is false and blame shifting on the council staff. That is not what leaders do or should act. You own the good and the stuff-ups. You acknowledge and learn from them regardless, as we set the direction from council. So there was an agenda put out. We had a robust, nearly hour discussion with councillors, give some feedback to officers. So unless councillors didn't read the agenda or something else, I can't explain it why that narrative was put out in the public. There was a disconnect between councillors' intention and the message to the public. Sure, as leaders, we have to unpack what went wrong and ensure it doesn't actually happen again. But every part along this process that's actually unfolded, from the officers to the councils to the article being written, has contributed to their angst and confusion from the community, and I can't apologise enough for that. To have Mr Hull's name mentioned in the public on this decision is disgraceful. There were no comms with his name. It was all the CEO or myself on there. So unless David went around telling people, I'm not sure how that got out, to be honest. And I apologise, Mr Hull, for that, and I have no words to express that commentary on social media. It was disgusting. So let me be clear, there was no vote contrary to what people have said on socials either. They might have extrapolated that from some comments. All councillors got to have the opportunity to have input at that workshop. Let me be clear on that. So let me be clear, the buck does stop with councillors. So we need to own it as a group, learn, move forward and go from there. So your second question, I know that was a long answer, Mr Manson. That was a very, obviously, several parts of that question. So question two?
I haven't answered question one first.
So you said, please, who the person was? The councillors. So I said the buck stops with councillors, Mr Mason, so that's the answer there. So your second question?
So you're saying council weren't aware of...
So, Mr Manson, I'll just direct you to your second question. I just want to conflict that. That's my answer there, Mr Manson. So, Mr Manson, that's my question there. If you're able to move to second question.
Question two. Since council has released a statement black-flipping on the Christmas light decision, stating that the lights have been installed by a generosity of two local businesses, Keppel Prints and R&M Menzel, can you please provide evidence in the form of invoices or accounts that clearly show the $30,000 expenditure your officer has stated the installation of the lights has cost in the past?
Thank you for your question, Mr Manson. Obviously, providing invoices for businesses is, you know, that's commercial in confidence, so I can't do that. What I can do is one of the criticisms of the community feedback survey is that council needs to listen more. So quite clearly, there is feedback from the community on this. Council has listened, but yet obviously in your question you're mentioning backflipping. So I can't, rather backflipping or listening to community feedback, Mr Manson. So that's all I could say about that question there, as much as I could say. So your third question?
So we answered the question too that the $30,000 was a mistake, that it wasn't a figure that was paid for by council, that it was provided by those two organisations free, yet you stated $30,000.
So is this your third question?
No. This is
Sorry, that's the answer to the second question, Mr Manson. So your third question?
Have you met?
Question 3. If the $30,000 expenditure your officer has stated the installation of the Christmas lights cost is proven to be incorrect, will the council return the funds to this year's Christmas and New Year celebration budget? And will the council use the funds to arrange for the Christmas and New Year celebrations as per previous years, including entertainment and the closing of Benning Street to traffic on New Year's Eve?
So thank you for your third question. Obviously, going through and saying that council's doing exactly what it did last year within its budget, it sort of obviously makes that last bit of that redundant, because we are actually doing it where previous years, including entertainment and closing off Bendick Street New Year's Eve. So all I can say there is, yes, we are doing it, so it does make that question a little redundant. I will draw on this question's 30,000, because obviously you were quite evident about that in the previous one. That 30,000 actually includes several things when it regards to the Christmas tree lighting. So I've got a breakdown here, but what I can say is the lights just don't go up in the tree. There needs to be partial road closures. There's other street decorations that is included with that, along with the works of the tree. As well, you have scissor lift, so you have a lot of things that go into it.
Not $30,000
So,
worth.
Mr. Manson, I'm letting you know.
That was the breakup.
So what I can do then, Mr. Manson, is maybe provide that on notice. And then that can be arranged for you. Thank you, Mr. Hull. Thank you for your questions. Ms. Torpy. Thank you.
The Mayor has reported on social media and in the Observer is saying New Year's Eve this year will be the same as last year. Last year's event was a band on the Gordon balcony with Bentinck Street closed off. It was a watered down New Year's compared to previous years. The first since COVID lockdown was not conducive to being family friendly or being a major draw card to the town. It was definitely not of a standard that would draw people from out of town to it, who would ultimately bring significant tourism dollars to town. People make the decision to return each year based on their experiences from the previous new year. Can council commit to
reinstating a quality
New Year's Eve event on the Portland foreshore lawns that will showcase Portland at its best to bring a maximum turnout of local and visitors to the town on New Year's Eve?
Thank you, Ms. Torpy, for that question. I would actually hand part of that over to the CEO to go through what's required when getting an event like that up. Obviously, I don't have all that information on me at hand. So for that part, I would need to take on notice. I am aware that there was inability to source staging, I think previous years, which might have contributed to the balcony. So, council doesn't keep hundreds to thousands of dollars worth of staging and electricals in its sheds. So we do go out to tender for those kind of things. And I will cover that, in your opinion, that it's not as good.
Yes.
That's obviously your opinion. Sometimes council is limited by what it has and can get access to. So again, I'll take that on notice, the rest of that question, and get the hopefully the CEO or the tourism officer to provide maybe some more information on that. Council, in its comms, has also said it will come out with further information on what we'll do as well.
Okay.
I know that doesn't exactly answer your question, but unfortunately I don't have all those answers with me right now. Thank you for your question. Mr. Waltz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is council aware of a potential project called Pacific Green Technologies battery project, 1 gigawatt to 2.5 gigawatt, and is in support of it? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Mr. Wells. I must say I did see that on social media. That is my extent of actually seeing that. That is certainly something that the CEO would handle. So what I'll have to do is take that on notice and maybe provide some commentary on that. I think you're spot on the money, Mr. Wells. I'd love to talk to you about that, but unfortunately now's not the place. But thank you very much for that good question. Mr O'Leary.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In May I was here with regards, I'm a regular swimmer down Nuns Beach, and I was here addressing council with regards the signage down there. If you're not a dog owner, there's no support on the signs for a non-dog owner, whereas the dog owners have got the signage there and they all seem to know it, saying that their dogs are allowed to be off leash anytime they like, except for the 1st of December till Easter Tuesday, but they're running around amok on after 9 o'clock, so it doesn't work. And I've been in touch with the rangers about it previously, but I've got no rights. I go down, I get Rover come up to me and they'll say, "Oh no, the dog's harmless," but when you're wet and you get the dog's claws on you. But anyway, I was here in May and I was told I was going to be contacted about if any transactions transpire, but I never heard anything more.
Thank you. So obviously the question is, you brought up the issue previously. Hang on, just bear with me for a second. So just to clarify your question, I'll just summarise your question there. You brought up something previously with council.
Yes.
You wrote to council and you're just asking why you haven't been contacted. So what I'll actually do is pass that over to the Director of Corporate Services, Mr Hull, who will provide maybe some further information with regards to yourself and your question.
Thank you, Mr O'Leary. I do remember having a conversation and an email exchange with you following a council meeting. I'm assuming that was the May version.
I heard after that. I never heard anything, whether it was yay, nay, things were going to happen, not happen. Never heard another thing.
Well, I think as we talked about, owners do have
From you once.
owners do have a requirement to maintain effective control over their animals. We do conduct periodic patrols around the area to try and make sure people are compliant, but we are obviously limited in resources. So I think your question, if I go from memory, is about some additions to the signage, if I'm
I've got no rights.
correct.
Anybody who goes there without a dog, and the dogs that approach her all the time, I can't go to that sign and say, "There's my rights up there."
Mr. I'm just sort of trying to respond to your question. I think there are rights. We do try and enforce them to the best of our ability, but I do think we talked about what else we could actually add to the signage. And on that respect, I'll touch base with our local laws manager and just see where we went through on that and come back to you on that matter.
Well, just briefly, it'd be better if all dogs were leashed on Nuns Beach. It's a main beach, and especially at holiday time.
So
it'd be better if they were all leashed. There's other parts of water around.
Mr Leary, what I'll do is obviously Mr Hull will get back to you with that. I know I can understand that's your opinion, but let's just get back to you with regards to your initial question. Thank you for your question. Mr Jowett.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, can you please inform our community how your discussions have gone with the main stakeholders in relation to the currently proposed new multi-purpose building to replace the Portland Yacht Club? Specifically, does the Yacht Club feel that the building is going to fit their needs?
Thank you, Mr Jowett. Mr Husband has actually been working with the Yacht Club. So what I might actually do, because it does regards to fit their needs, I'll hand it over to Mr Stewart and provide some commentary there.
It's on the agenda.
Thank you for your question, Mr Jowett. Basically, the Yacht Club provided further information last week, so we're still working our way through that. We're also talking with other stakeholders and the community more broadly. So, yeah, that's continuing. I can't talk about specifics, but, yeah, it's definitely underway.
Thank you, Mr Jowett. Well, just before you continue, the galleries, people's voices do carry, so if people can keep the chatter to a minimum, that would be fantastic. Your second question, sir?
In relation to the council leased facility at 56 Percy Street, can you please explain why a new 3-year lease was entered into on the 1st of October 2022, but vacated less than a year later? And were there any financial repercussions for breaking this lease?
Thank you, Mr Jowett. Obviously, 56 Percy Street is council information, the council office there. So what I might do is pass over to Mr. Hull, who can provide some information there for you.
Thank you, Mr. Jowett. The original intention of 56 Percy Street was to set it up as a permanent customer service centre, going and also as a potentially option coming out of the COVID years and for business continuity purposes. Going in there further, finding out that the requirements that we'd actually need to meet to turn it into the office to meet our environments became rather costly, more than what we first anticipated. So the decision was to transition back to Cliff Street here. So we are in negotiations with the landlord at the moment, so there is certainly another tenant that's coming in there to, which will minimise council having to be there for the 3 years of the lease. Those terms are currently still under negotiation, but there will be, council will have a cost in the transition, but certainly nowhere as much as what it could have been.
And that will be released to the public in due course?
Just on that, so those sort of negotiations with the landlord are not something that would normally be go in the public realm.
Commercial in confidence, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Jowett. And your third question, sir.
Third question. What do you see as the council's greatest achievement over the past 12 months that you have been mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Jowett. We do have an agenda item coming up this evening, which I will probably highlight several things that this council has achieved over the past 12 months of that cycle. For me personally, and I know you're saying as mayor, so I guess it's not supposed to be personal, because it should be all councillors, but I would suggest councillors, one of our biggest successes, I think, we were talking about this earlier, and it's on the agenda tonight, is the home and community care and the transition there. When you're dealing with the most vulnerable people in our community, and the need to have a smooth transition, because we've taken some lessons from councils closer to Melbourne, where it was not as smooth. So I was going to save this for later. So Miss Miller, I would thank you very much for ensuring that has happened to the best of our ability. So I think as a council group, I think home and community care services is certainly an issue. But again, there were numerous, and I could pick one or two others off the top of my head that would be just as big as well. So, but certainly taking care of the vulnerable in our community, that's, I think, why us as councillors have signed up, is to look after the community. So it's no bigger honour than to be able to do that.
Thank you.
Is Mr. Hunt here? No. What I might do is take Mr. Hunt's questions on notice and provide those responses to him. Miss Oates, is Miss Oates here? I'm waiting for further information regarding some questions she's actually asked as well, so I'll take those on notice and still wait for Mrs. Oates to get back to me as well. And that is the questions from the gallery. So move to item 7 on page 6, councillors, declarations, conflict of interest. Do councillors have any conflicts of interest tonight's meeting? Thank you, councillor. Confirmation of minutes, councillors, a recommendation there on page 7.
Mr Mayor, I'll have much pleasure in moving the recommendation on page 7 that the minutes of the council meeting held Tuesday the 26th of September 2023 as circulated be confirmed, and that meeting was held in Casterton.
Thank you, Mr Northcott. For a second, thank you, Councillor Carr.
Thank you. I'll second that, Mr Mayor.
Any commentary, Councillor Northcott? Any opposed? No commentary. All those, anything further? All those in favour? So passed. 4-0. Presentations, nil. Deputations, nil. There is a item 11.1, a notice of motion. Councillor Carr, that is yours. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, the matter has been resolved. I wish to withdraw the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Any objections, councillors? Councillor Carr withdrawn. All those in favour? Pass that. So passed. Petitions for this council meeting, Neil. Committee reports, item 13.1, councillors, their recommendation there on page 10. Thank you, Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll move that Council receives the minutes of the Audit and Risk Committee held on the 14th of September 2023 and adopts the Audit and Risk Committee Self-Assessment Survey 2022-23 in accordance with section 54(4)(b) of the Local Government Act 2020, and also that Council adopts the Audit and Risk Biannual Report for the period of 1st of January 2023 to the 30th of June 2023 in accordance with section 54(5)(b) of the Local Government Act 2020.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. We have a second there.
Second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The Audit and Risk Committee is an independent body set up by Council to monitor and review and advise Council on matters of our accountability and internal controls. We have a number of external members on that that are skilled in this area, and as we review our policies as they go through, on a regular basis. They have a charter each year. This is just the annual report for the period of the self-assessment survey, but also the Audit and Risk Biannual Report. So we have the two reports each year, and I recommend this to Council for adoption.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Councillor Carr.
No further comment, Mr Mayor.
Any further councillors? All those in favour? So passed. Page 13, councillors' management reports there, 14.1, recommendation. Thank you, Councillor Carr.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I move the recommendation that Council approve the Councillor and Chief Executive Officer leave of absence register presented as a confidential circulation under section 35(1)(e)(4)(6) of the Local Government Act 2020.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. We have a second there. Councillor Northcott.
Yes, Mr Mayor.
Beautiful, thank you. Any opposed? Councillor Carr, any commentary?
Procedural, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Any further councillors? All those in favour? So passed, 4-0. Item 14.2, councillors, on page 15, quarterly expenditure report. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that Council receives the Councillors' quarterly expenditure report for the period 1st of July 2023 to the 30th of September 2023.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Do we have a second there? Councillor Northcott.
Yeah, that's him. Seconded, Mr Mayor.
Any opposed? Councillor Carr.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. For those new in the gallery, this is about transparency. It's about what councillors get paid in terms of allowances, and it's what expenses that we incur. Thank you.
Councillor Carr. Councillor Northcott, any further commentary?
No comment.
Good. Any further? Any all those in favour? So passed, 4-0. Councillors, move to item 14.3, the Glenelg Shire financial report for September. There's a recommendation there, Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll move that Council receives the financial report for the period ending September 2023.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Thank you, Councillor
Second,
Carr.
Mr Mayor.
None opposed. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, it's pretty early in the financial year, so it's probably not as reflective. But look, I'll just point out a couple of things that we've already been able to achieve this financial year. Just the disposal of property, as you can imagine, Council does. Very, very good. We've also had a change in our materials, which we sort of indicated that we were going to have about a 30% increase in materials. We're on track at the minute that we're just, which as we work out our yearly budgets, you know, we're about just over 1 million lower at the moment at this time of our cycle than we anticipated, which is good, which means the price of those materials is starting to come back a little bit. I think, Mr Mayor, one of the interesting things is, you know, when we see our road infrastructure, that we've only spent 42,000 this year so far on our roads. Not to get excited about that, because we're about to start a road making season which runs November through to about October. So during those really clear summer months when we don't have a lot of rain, we'll spend $8 million this year. So, you know, I expect that the community can see that that will absolutely fluctuate in the next year. We put $2.9 million of ratepayers' funds aside for maintenance of our roads. We actually now have over $8 million, which is we've picked up money from the federal government and the state government that we've applied for road funding. So that's a, you know, $5 million boost, which is excellent for our overall you know, road recovery. Just remember that these are our local council roads. So all of those local roads, this does not include obviously spending any money on any state roads. These are council roads. These are the roads that council and as ratepayers you're responsible for. So a really good result there with that funding that we've received. So I'm pretty excited about that, because roads are probably one of our most expensive items in our budget. So I'd like to thank staff for their efforts in securing that extra funding again this year.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Stevens covered it quite adequately, but it is, I do echo those comments from the comprehensive income statement, where we are, you know, 1.7 million in front of where we predicted, and it's mainly driven by our employee costs being a little bit down and our materials and services also being a little bit down, and it's mainly due to timing. But well done to everyone.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Commentary, councillors? No? All those in favour? So passed 4-0. $14.4, councillors, a recommendation there. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll move that council adopts the revised council policy, fraud and corruption control, and the fraud and corruption control plan.
Well said, Councillor Stevens. We have a seconder.
Second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Stevens.
Yeah, Mr Mayor, I mentioned earlier the Internal Audit Committee, and this is one of our policies. Obviously, quite clearly, we have a charter and we have a list of policies that are reviewed at a certain time, and they go through a whole process. This is the review. Obviously, all of these processes are really important to us and in running our business and making sure that we meet all the compliance standards and the due diligence throughout our whole organisation. Look, this is being put through to the Audit Committee, and it's here for councils to adopt this evening. And look, it's just an update of the previous plan, and certainly it meets all the standards Australia-wide.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Anything further, councillors? I think that covers quite well. All those in favour? So passed. Councillors, 14.5, the annual report. The recommendation there.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move the recommendation that council adopts the Glenelg Shire Council annual report for 22-23, including the audited financial statements and performance statement.
Thank you, Councillor Carr.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Any opposed? No. Councillor Carr.
Would you like to go first, Mr Mayor?
I would. I'll cut back how long I was going to take, because obviously you'd like to speak to the item as well. Obviously this is our annual report that sort of outlines everything that's gone through the year, and there was many key milestones or projects that were undertaken, so I'd like to just run through a couple of them. I think our biggest as a councillor job, our main job, is appointment of a CEO position. So that was undertaken this year as well. This financial year was a first that saw the necessary change from a rebate to a differential to align with the new Local Government Act. While I must concede and acknowledge that the pain and confusion it did cause some members of the community, it'd be remiss of me not to highlight that it was a necessary piece of the overall picture to ensure the stability and the ongoing viability of the council. I did mention the home and community care services previously, that was certainly something that I think councillors were very passionate about, just seeing that through. Something that's not quite as sexy, all the planning work that was actually done. The amount of pages we had to read as councillors going through planning, there was C106 Glenelg, talking hundreds and hundreds of pages. Frameworks for the rural land strategy, strategic framework plan, Portland rural living assessment. These are all necessary bodies of work that had to be undertaken for the better part of a decade. So I wish to thank the council staff that were involved with doing that. The RDV, Portland Diversification Fund, that enabled some commercial development, in particular Bunnings. I think that was sort of a highlight for Portland. EV charging this year as well. I know that's not a particular highlight, but it's something where society is moving forward with electric vehicles, and that council was able to be proactive there. There's a few other things that I can mention as long as Australia Day. That was certainly something major that engagement from the community. I think the highest engagement the council's ever have on your say page. That would be remiss of me not to actually mention that. There is a lot of other stuff I could leave, like the some of the major assets, but I'll leave that to other councillors to cover that off if you would like. So Councillor Carr, I throw back to yourself.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I'll be short on this one. Look, I really enjoyed reading the annual report. The number of green ticks is really pleasing. You know, we're into our third year now of our council plan. A number of projects have already been ticked off, and there's also a lot of red dots too, which means they're in preparation, which is really exciting for this council over the next 12 to 18 to 24 months. I refer the community to pages 5 and 6 when it does come out. The Mayor touched on it. They're the highlights for the year. There's many highlights that happen, and sometimes when you look back, you know, this council, its staff, it actually does do a lot in a calendar year. As we look forward to the future, you know, this council is going to be committed to exploring greener future, and we'll have to work closely with relevant stakeholders to explore opportunities for decarbonisation, which will be forced upon us, and we'll have to budget for that and come up with those ideas as to how we're going to do that in the future, which I think is quite exciting. With a number of opportunities in our region. There's already some existing green energy in the region, but council's not going to be immune from it, and we will have to look at our whole operation, which will be exciting as we move forward. Thank you.
Councillor Carr. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, Mr Mayor, look, it's a great year, but, you know, the financial statement has finally come back from the Auditor General's office, so we've been able to plug that into the annual report to get to tonight's meeting. We finished in a really strong financial position, which is always pleasing. I recommend the report to all of our ratepayers and residents across the Shire. You know, I'm just looking here on a great graph that actually looks at how we split up $100 of ratepayer funds across the organisation, and how, you know, and it's really interesting to see how those funds and what proportion of that $100 gets spread between community development, you know, local laws, infrastructure, parks and gardens, or whether it be community facilities, etc. It's a really informative. I love the fact, and, you know, I thank the staff. It's a really easy read, and I think that's really important because that keeps the reader engaged. But look, all in all, you know, working together with our staff, it's a great report. It's got a lot of projects in there and a lot of services that we've delivered throughout the year. And thanks to all that came together throughout the year to have another successful year. Thank you.
Councillor Stevens, any further commentary?
No.
No. Just before I do put this to the vote, on behalf of councillors, current, past, that were involved in this financial year, I want to thank the staff that have put this together. I know it takes a tremendous amount of work to make that happen. So I'd like to thank the CEO and the staff that have made this happen. So councillors, all those in favour? So passed. 4-0. Item 14.6, councillors, Asian Disability. Thank you, Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll move that Council notes and receives the report on the transition project for age and disability service within the Glenelg Shire.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. We have a seconder.
Myself, Mr Mayor.
Thank you,
and,
Councillor Northcott.
Second the motion.
Any opposed? None. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As everybody would be aware, there was a Royal Commission into aged care and quality and safety through the federal government for support in the home for our aged. Council has historically had what we call HAC services, home and community care, and those changed on the 1st of July, or will commence on the 1st of July. Council, with the Commonwealth Government, sought to have a change, so we went through a transition program with the Commonwealth Government, and as some residents now know, those services have now been picked up by the 3 healthcare providers here in the Glenelg Shire. These services are provided to our age and disability residents across the Shire, and certainly some of our most vulnerable residents, and such important services, which we knew that with the changes, Council would be unable to meet those commitments, particularly with the nursing and district nursing type of care that would be needed, particularly for those most vulnerable people. The transition project certainly worked very well. I think there were some learnings with the Commonwealth Government, with some metropolitan councils in Melbourne, that our staff very, studiously took advantage of those learnings. The feedback I've received, and I think that change is always particularly difficult, and particularly difficult if you're vulnerable, and the outcome has been a very smooth transition, Mr Mayor, and everybody's receiving the same care and often with the same person still mowing their lawns or still coming to clean their home for them. So what was sort of probably a little bit of a scary option for them when they first felt that this service was transitioning ended up being relatively simple for them because it remained the same. Look, Mr Mayor, I just would like to obviously support the staff. This has been a huge transition for us. It's a service that we've undertaken for many, many years. It came to the decision that it needed to be provided by another provider that had, that discipline in those particular areas. So the healthcare providers across the Shire picking up this service is very apt. And just thank staff for their consideration of our most vulnerable in our community, and thank everybody that's been involved in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Councillor Northcott.
Nothing more to add, Mr Mayor, but there's been no publicity about any problems that's been there, so that's a real plus, isn't it? And it's been a job that was talked about in my previous life here, and it's finally come to fruition, and hopefully it's be as seamless for the people and the community for years to come. Thank you.
Mr. Carr.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Stevens and Councillor Northcott. The Aged and Disability Transition Project did commence in June 2022 and come to an end in September 2023. It was a massive effort from our staff in the community services sector. This council was a long-term provider of entry-level home and community care services to assist people to live independently in the community, our community. Council is no longer funded to deliver those services in our Shire, but it was pleasing to get this closure report it was such a sensitive process with many staff, many recipients and families involved, including many of those being the most vulnerable members within our community. I understand change is difficult, but trust that every effort was made to provide support where it was required to those members within our community by our staff. And I do thank our staff for that. I thank the families of the community members who helped those people transition. And I thank Ms Miller for the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. I'll just echo those sentiments. Ms Miller, that you took this project on yourself, not on yourself, but obviously with your staff, and you saw it through to near completion now. So on behalf of Council, I thank you and your staff for transitioning and making that happen. Thank you. Councillors, all those in favour of the recommendation? So passed 4-0. Councillors, there's a recommendation there on page 14.7 on page 30 that I have. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Can I move the Council take off the table the report titled Portland Foreshore Multi-Purpose Facility Design and Location, and that we endorse option 3 location as the location for the design and construction of the Portland Foreshore Multi-Purpose Facility, and that we inform the community of the outcome of the landowner's preferred location and the feedback regarding predicted sea level rises and their risks.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Is there a seconder?
I would second it.
Thank you, Councillor Northcott. Any opposed? None. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, this is in line with the state government funding that we've received for this project and the changes that the state government have made to the planning requirements to take into effect the sea level rise, which has given the options for the location of the building as the preferred location that the government has recommended to council. We will now go out to the community, Mr Mayor, and seek feedback from the community and other stakeholders, obviously, in relation to this, now that we've sought that advice and now this has been endorsed.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Councillor Northcott.
Mr Mayor, I'd like to say that there's probably a 5-week period of opportunities to put submissions into this hearing, and we just look forward to getting the public feedback, mainly because it's pretty hard, like, to get the word out to everyone. Even with that previous referendum we've just completed, there was some person interviewed I saw and didn't know anything about it, so it's pretty hard to get the message out right around. But this is the Portland project, and it's good to see a turnout here tonight. Thank you.
Councillor Carr, just for clarification, maybe
I might add a comment, Mr Mayor. Can I just clarify? I haven't given any time frame for consultation. I'll allow the director of this particular project to determine that, and that will be provided within the advertising, etc. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. I was just going to clarify that. Thank you, Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I did lay it on the table 4 weeks ago, and I'm glad that it's back on the agenda. It did give us 4 weeks for staff and councillors to process the information, councillors to process it, staff to continue to work on it. In that time, obviously, there were discussions with DECA and there was discussions with key stakeholders, and there's been some further progress made over those 4 weeks. So this enables it now to be released to the community. The location has been landed. It is location where the existing yacht club is. It can't go anywhere else, as we've been advised. So now it's about, let's show the community what the design looks like and go through that process and continue to work with the stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. I know I don't comment normally on agenda items, but I want to make it abundantly clear that Council initially went out for a different area. The feedback from the landholder, and that's Deca in this, Deca in this case, that due to the Marine and Coastal Consent Act, it needs to be, they're saying it needs to go where the existing yacht club is. That required a location change, that required a size change. But we need to work within the framework and within those policies to ensure a project gets off the ground. And that's what this is. This is a lot of funding from government to be invested in this community. We need to work with the stakeholders. They've outlined several concerns in regard to how they run now to how they may run in the future. Council needs to work through those, and Council is willing to work through those. But this process here is just acknowledging where it has to go and getting some of that feedback so that we can progress this project, and that's where it is at. So we're asking for that feedback and take it from there. So councillors...
Would you like me to close, Mr Mayor?
Thank you, Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. You've brought up some very pertinent points there, and I will just reiterate that the government has changed its coastal policy. That is not just for the Glenelg Shire, that is along the whole of the coastline of Victoria. The footprint, we are lucky that we have a building here on the foreshore. In the next 10 years, that building will probably need to be replaced, but we're lucky to have that building there, and we are allowed to use the footprint. Allowed to use the footprint, nothing more than the footprint that exists there today. That ruling is for us, but for any council across the coastline of Victoria in today's planning market with the state government. So, look, we'll go out and engage with the community and let them know what the current standards are with the state government and accept the feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. All those in favour? So passed 4-0.
This has changed quite slightly.
Item 14.8, councillors. Recommendation there. Thank you, Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move the recommendation that Council 1 award 2023-24-01 provision of professional services to the Glenelg Shire Council to the tenderers as listed in this report. 2, that the CEO be authorised to execute all documents relating to these contracts. 3, that the Director of Assets be authorised to negotiate and execute further extensions of the contract in accordance with contract documentation.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Seconder. Thank you, Councillor Northcott. Any opposed? Councillor Carr.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Provision of professional services. These are our consultants, our engineers, people like that help council do their designs and all their drawings, etc. It did go out via tender link on Thursday, 22nd of June 2023, and closed on Thursday the 22nd of July 2023. So the full list is there, and congratulations to those who made the list. Thank you.
Councillor Carr. Councillor Northcott, any further commentary? Or any further on? No. All those in favour? So passed 4-0. Confidential reports for item 15, nil. Urgent business, councillors, item 16. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move that we consider an item of urgent business for a potential change to the date of the statutory meeting, please.
Certainly, Councillor Stevens.
Second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. All those in favour? None opposed? So passed. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, this has been circulated in writing to the councillors, as you know. If required, the motion is, if required, Council, in accordance with section 2.2.13 of the governance rules, number 1, amend the date of the statutory meeting to the 8th of November 2023 to enable the Chief Executive Officer to be present to chair the election of the Mayor as required under Section 25(3) of the Local Government Act of 2020. And number 2, undertake public notification on the change of the date.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Any commentary? I think that's... Sorry, seconded, Councillor
Second,
Carr.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes. None opposed. No. Any commentary, Councillor Stevens? None. Fair enough. All those in favour? So passed. Have that, Laura?
Okay.
Beautiful. That brings us to the closure of tonight's council meeting. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you.